Well, thank you for joining us today for Webinar Wednesday, and thanks for joining in the conversation in the chat box as well. I really do like to have that conversation ongoing. Today, we are talking about math. I love this topic, and it seems like we just don't have enough time to talk about math. It doesn't get as much attention in a lot of after-school programs as science, technology, and engineering do. It's kind of like the M is silent sometimes. And so that's part of why we wanted to do this topic for our webinar and talk about the fun ways that you can integrate math into your after-school program in a way that's going to be a good experience for your staff and for your students. We're going to talk about how you can build your staff's confidence in math, and also we'll finish up today with some ideas about where you can go to find math activities. And I'm encouraging everyone as we get started to share in the chat box if you have a favorite site or source that you like to use to find really good math activities for your after-school program or other STEM activities as well. I also want to encourage you to use the chat box as a place to ask questions. And if you have anything that you want to be sure we cover during the webinar, you can share that in the chat box as well. We'll be doing some fun math, we'll be watching some videos, and doing some interactive learning. Let me start by sharing my screen. All right. Welcome again to the webinar, and let's get started. The most recent data from our 21st Century Community Learning Center shows that students who attend their after-school program regularly improved their classroom attendance and their classroom behavior and showed improvement in both math and language arts. What I think is most important about these improvements, when you get into the data in a little bit more detail, is not only was there improvement across the board, but students who were attending after-school programs were able to narrow the gap so that they were on a more level playing field with their peers as a result of their participation in after-school. And that's in a typical 21st century after-school program, and it's not necessarily just a program that's emphasizing math in their programming. So there's a lot of evidence that we can really have an impact on young people through quality programming in after school, and that we can make a difference on math, which is a very critical skill and something that a lot of students struggle with. So let's see how we can do that. In STEM, we often talk about the practices of science or the practices of engineering. And research is clear that it's important to use these practices with children in our programs because they build their confidence in seeing themselves as a person who does science or engineering. We know that these practices foster problem solving in young people and support their content learning. The same thing is true for math practices, but we don't talk about those as much. So today I'm going to be emphasizing 4 practices or habits of mind, as they're sometimes called, that learners need as they use math every day and that they can develop through intentional activities in their after-school program. After-school programs can foster these habits of mind by creating an environment where learners are highly motivated to engage in mathematical thinking, to have mathematical conversations, to remember numerical combinations, and to develop problem solving. So your practices are learning how to make sense of problem solving and persevere as they're solving problems, to reason abstractly and quantitatively, to construct arguments and to critique the arguments of others. That comes from talking math, and also to look for patterns and structure. I think sometimes this last one is the most fun, but they're all fun, and they're all things that we can foster through the type of environment we set up and the way we talk about math in our programs. So just to kind of summarize, this has been fast, but we've already talked about the research basis that tells us that it is possible to make a difference in how young people are doing in math. We talked about how participation can improve their math, even when there's not a specific focus on math activities. But that improvement is usually even more powerful when there is an explicit focus on math. And we talked about the practices that we can focus on in after school time to help develop mathematical thinking and problem solving that will help them regardless of the content that they're covering in the classroom. And now I'm going to share 7 recommendations for integrating math activities into after-school programs from Expanding Minds and Opportunities, Leveraging the Power of After-School and Summer Learning for Student Success. This is research from 2013, and this research study recommended that we include math tutoring that supports individuals or small groups in working on specific skills. I recommend that you look for partners in your community or in your school that can help provide the math tutoring. That may not be something your staff themselves are experts in, but you may be able to find partners that can help you with that. The second recommendation is to find math in everyday situations, like a basketball game or a cooking club that you're already doing in your after-school program, and to include activities that explore everyday math. And we'll go into this in more detail a little bit about how you can do that. You can create math centers where small groups of children can work independently or collaboratively on problem-solving tasks at their own pace. Math centers really leverage the power of after school, where young people are making choices for themselves about what to participate in, where they're working collaboratively, sometimes across age groups. So they're not necessarily working with others that are just their age or grade to work through these problems. So that's a great resource that really fits into the structure of a lot of after-school programs. You can also play math games that target skills and strategies that the young people need to develop. Focus on math that is in the other STEM activities that you're using in your program, and emphasize real-world problem solving. Take on math projects. When you're doing project-based learning, or if you do project-based learning, look for projects that allow students to deepen and understand their understanding of math through authentic investigations and using math in a way that's important to their individual projects. And finally, build family and community connections to help create the enthusiasm for math in your after-school program. Now I'm going to go through each of these 7 strategies individually and talk about what it might look like in a typical after-school program. And if you have comments to share in the chat box, I encourage you to do that. If this is a strategy that you're using, or if you have some concerns, you're not sure it would work in your program, let us work together to help you solve those problems. Math tutoring is a pretty obvious way to build math skills, and a lot of programs are already doing this, either through specifically math tutoring or through homework help. One-on-one or small group tutoring is a really good way to reinforce and expand on classroom content, and you can be right there expanding on what was covered today or this week in their classroom through tutoring that is really closely coordinated with the school days. Tutors can come from community organizations, local universities, or even be some of your classroom teachers. Regular positive feedback through tutoring can encourage learners to build their skills and succeed. But today I'm going to really challenge you to go beyond math tutoring in your program. This is an effective strategy and I encourage you to use it, but I will also encourage you to find other ways to incorporate math. There's a question in the chat box about best practices for training tutors using Common Core. I don't have a good strategy for that, so if there's anybody out there who is in a Common Core state, where you have some strategies that are helping your staff or your tutors understand Common Core and tutor students in it, that would be a great resource you could share with the group. The second strategy I want to talk about is finding math in everyday situations. Many of the activities you're already doing in your program are infused with math. You just need to help students reflect on the math that is already in activities like cooking, gardening, playing basketball, or making music. This isn't necessarily a change in what you're doing in your program, but in how you think about it and how you encourage students to reflect on it. Here's a quick example that you can use right away. It's called scouting numbers. And what you're going to do for this activity is just walk around your playground or walk around your school and challenge the students to find math in their neighborhood. Have them look for places like gas pumps, cash registers, speedometers, license plates, or addresses. And then ask them what the math is in that. What is it counting? What are the patterns that are there? Addresses is a really interesting one, particularly if they notice that as they walk down one side of the street, the numbers aren't sequential, but they're getting larger and there's a pattern, then you can start talking about odds and evens and other patterns that they might see in those numbers. Have your students use digital cameras to take pictures of the math in the neighborhood and share them on your social media and talk about what they've seen in terms of math. So this is just kind of an everyday math thing, and it's not changing what you're doing necessarily, but helping them see the math that is in that everyday activity. Another strategy is to create math centers where you can solve problems at their own pace. Math centers can include math puzzles, problems to solve using manipulatives or brain teasers that use mathematical reasoning. Math centers give opportunities for learners to exercise choice and to learn together socially. So it fits really well into how we do after school. Mathematical Mondays might be a fun way to introduce math centers into your program. If you want to implement this strategy, I recommend that you begin by talking with your classroom teachers to find out what are the concepts students are learning and what activities they might enjoy. Ask them if they have centers that you could incorporate into your after-school program. There may be things they've already got set up during the day that they'd be willing to let you use. Or they may have resources in their cupboards that you could use during the after-school time and then return to them. With math centers, your staff are acting as facilitators, not teachers. They can circulate among the students, ask questions, and guide them forward into deeper thinking, but their role isn't to provide answers, it's to give them feedback and encourage their desire to learn. You can also give them opportunities to practice using math tools at your centers. Tools like rulers, compasses, scales, pictures, or manipulatives are things that students are intrigued by, and they may not have had a chance to explore those openly. Give them a chance to try them out, to give them some challenges to do with those tools. And again, see if you can borrow some from classroom teachers so that you don't have to go out and purchase them specifically for your program. It's tempting to show learners how to use tools or manipulatives, but math tools work best when learners figure out how to use them for themselves to solve the problem in front of them. So take a very exploration-focused mode toward math centers where you're encouraging students to explore, but not necessarily emphasizing that there's a particular right answer or that they need to find one answer to that problem. Playing math games that are fun also helps students develop targeted math strategies and skills. And again, the teachers in your school are going to be the best resources to know what those skills are that students need to work on and what kind of games might help them expand their knowledge and skills, and maybe even be willing to share some of those with you. When you're playing games, allow students to work together. Train your staff to facilitate the games by asking questions but not trying to give answers. And encourage students to use what they know about math to find answers when they're frustrated or stuck. If you have learners that are at different levels or English language learners, you may need to think intentionally about how you're going to engage and incorporate those learners into experiences like this. One of the strategies you can use is to highlight new vocabulary and math concepts for all the students in your program before they start playing a math game. That helps English language learners get a little bit extra reinforcement and practice using the language that they're going to use during that game so they can participate fully and be successful in the activity. Another strategy might be to partner a beginning English language learner or a student who's struggling with math with a more experienced or older teammate that can help them participate fully in the game. I think encouraging teamwork in games, having students play in part with a partner, not against a partner, but with a partner helping them play the game, is good for all learners, not just for English language learners or others who might be struggling in your program. Let's try out a simple math game that you could do in your program. It's called What's My Rule? And What's My Rule is a game where you get to use algebra and visual clues to determine the rules for sorting and classifying. This activity comes from the Afterschool Training Toolkit for Math, and it's one of the resources I shared in the chat box, and it'll be available along with the recording. Playing this game, I'd have some manipulatives sorted in front of me and hand a button to a participant and ask them to decide which group to put it in. Then I reply, that satisfies my rule, or that does not satisfy my rule. As a follow-up, I can ask, what does this button have in common with others that satisfy my rule? Or what makes this button different from others that satisfy my rule? After a few correct guesses, then you can ask the student, why do you think this arrangement satisfies my rule? This is a game that can be played with manipulatives like buttons, or it can be played with a whiteboard using numbers and dividing those numbers into two different groups. So in this example, I am sorting the buttons based on their size. So when I hand them a button, I'm deciding if it is larger than the ivory-colored white button with two holes in the middle, then they put it on the left-hand side. That satisfies my rule. If it's smaller than that button and they put it on the right-hand side, that satisfies my rule. But if they switch it around and they put a small button on the left-hand side, then I would say that does not satisfy my rule. With a little bit of practice using a game like this, not only do they learn how to play the game, but they can start learning how to make the rules for themselves and play it. So I mentioned if you don't want to use manipulatives, another option is to play it at the whiteboard and to have two numbers. You might start by having a group of odd numbers and a group of even numbers, and have them practice with that, and then decide what the rule is. And that's a really interesting one, because it could be that your rule is the number is divisible by 2, or it could be that your rule is the number is even, or there could be another way you might describe those two sets. So all of those are ways for them to practice thinking about how you might describe a set of numbers or a set that goes together. Another way to play it is to divide the participants in your program using a simple rule like is wearing blue or is in second grade, and put them into two groups. And again, give them an opportunity to try to guess what that rule is by asking, where should this person go? Which group does this person fit in? And then telling them whether that satisfies the rule or not. As you play the game more, rules can get more complex. Like you might divide them by a rule that says their grade is divisible by 3. So you would have your third graders and your sixth graders together, but the second graders and the fourth graders would be in a different group. So there's all different ways you can use this rule. It helps them with their mathematical reasoning, and it also helps them practice talking math. That's an example of what you might do for some math games in your after-school program. Another strategy is to focus on the math that is in STEM activities and allow learners to practice using their math knowledge and skills and practices through STEM activities that might focus on other areas of STEM. This example that I'm thinking about here is called a pocket solar system, which focuses on measurement and scale. So they've got some math concepts in there, but is really an astronomy activity. And I'll share the pocket solar system activity with you as well as all the other resources at the end of the webinar, and they will be shared on the webinar page at Click to Science starting tomorrow. So when you're looking for STEM activities that you can use to build math, look for activities that help you see patterns, apply reasoning, or experience math in a physical way. Pocket solar system is an example of these, where you take a strip of paper and use it with starting with the sun on one end and making marks, depending on the length of your paper, to represent how far away from the sun each of those planets are. So they get a sense of the scale of the solar system and realize that the distance between Earth and the sun, they realize what that distance is relative to the distance between Earth and one of the feather planets like Saturn. So they can get a sense for what the scale is there. And when you make it something small, or not too small, but small enough that they can put it in their pocket, you give them a chance to experience that in a physical way that also helps them embody the math concepts and see how it all works. Another strategy you can do is to use project-based learning as a way to build math skills, taking on projects that allow learners to apply their math knowledge and practices through authentic challenges, activities, or investigations. And when we're talking about a math project, we're talking about something that's bigger, that's not just a one-day activity, but it's a project that they're going to be working on over a series of times, sometimes over a whole quarter that they might spend on their project. The key part of math projects being effective is that the learner's need for math skills emerges out of an authentic situation rather than from a classroom exercise. So it helps them see the tie between mathematics and real life experiences. And because it's a problem that they're interested in solving, a real world problem, it also increases their motivation to really understand the math, reasoning, or skill that they're using to solve that problem. Project-based learning in general is a great way to integrate math, science, and literacy skills through community engagement. Through project work, students develop a need to learn new content and to apply it in their project. Projects work best when students work on them in a regular, ongoing way. And some projects take several days to complete, or weeks. It also helps for learners to have an authentic audience for their project, somebody that they're going to present it to at the end of their project. And being an authentic audience is a good way to engage members of your community with your after-school program and help them see what's really happening in your program. A culminating activity, such as having a final product or presentation, is a pretty typical way to wrap up project-based learning. It can also include involving families so that they can present it to their families along with an audience from the community that's going to be appropriate and interested in that topic. Some examples of math projects might be planning and designing a scale drawing or a scale model for a school garden, a theme park, or a playground. There's an example here of how you might do a scale model that shows your yard and your home. They can apply that same skill and use math and measurement and scale to design a playground for their school or a garden for their school. A math project, another one might be, let me go back to that one. If they're doing a project like that, a landscape design company or a community planner might be a really good authentic audience for students to share their projects with. They might also be somebody that could come in and introduce what skills and strategies they would need in order to solve that problem initially, and then come back and see where students get to as they work through their project ideas. Another project could be an art project using tessellations. That's what the student on the right is doing. And students could share their projects through a community art show that includes other local artists as an authentic audience, an authentic way to share what they've learned on that project. The last strategy I wanted to talk about is building family and community connections. An essential element for any of these strategies is to build the connections that are going to help youth be successful. The goal here is to capitalize on the potential that families have in supporting mathematics learning and helping their students be math learners. A popular choice in many after-school programs is to do a family math night, which gives parents and students a chance to enjoy doing mathematics together, foster a positive attitude toward math, and encourage a productive relationship between the family and the school, and also help parents understand their children's math curriculum. So a family math night might be a way you want to go with this. If you do decide to do a family math night, I really encourage you to coordinate with the teachers in your school to know what it is they'd like to see shared with students and families at that math night, and if they want to be part of the program, so that they can talk about the curriculum and what they want students to know and be able to do. Family Math is a book published by Lawrence Hall of Science. It's an older book, but it has great ideas and resources for putting together a family math night. So I encourage you to look for that book if you're thinking about doing family math, and use that to think about how you can engage families, foster positive attitudes, develop positive relationships with the school, and help parents connect to and understand the children's math curriculum and what they're learning and why they're learning it. So all of those are ideas that you can build on. The goal in all of these is to build confidence for students. But before you can do that, you may need to focus on the confidence of your staff. So we've talked about ideas that you can use, but now I want to focus on some of the barriers. And the biggest barrier is probably this issue of confidence. There's a lot of anxiety for many people around math. And so having a positive impact and build confidence in your students first requires that staff are confident and competent in their role in doing these activities. As I said at the beginning of this webinar, math is fun, and that's what we really want to emphasize in after school. But many of us don't have fun memories of our math experiences when we were younger. What tends to stick with us is not so much the positive memories. So the first thing I encourage you to do is to take some of the activities that we've tried out today, like What's My Rule, our scouting numbers, or the pocket solar system, and try them with your staff. Do that activity together just to kind of experience it and have some fun together, and then talk about what you want to do and what you want to change in your program. As I post the recording of the webinar, I will also post links to some of the Click to Science PD resources that you might find particularly helpful in focusing on math and helping make it fun for your staff and your program participants. Activities like this one called Prepare and Plan help staff think about the issues that they need to be aware of as they're planning an activity. It includes a template for planning STEM activities that you can help staff use to think about how they can integrate math through centers, games, activities, or projects. All of these strategies we just finished talking about. It also includes videos and opportunities to see that skill in action, to actually see students using math and thinking about math. For many of us, the key to building confidence and trying something new is first seeing someone else doing it and getting a picture of what that looks like. So we want you to be able to share with your staff videos like this one that help you see what math can look like in an after-school program. We're going to watch a short video in which students are learning about using models, mathematical thinking and models. And then we'll talk about how you could help your staff reflect on this video and think about this activity. So I'm going to stop the presentation here and open up the video. Give me just a moment to do that. And as I'm doing that, I see Marianne just shared in the chat box a great resource that you can use to find some more math activities. All right, let's look for this resource we want to share.
Each group, I'm going to give each group a deck of cards and some paper, and these sets of cards are going to represent people. What I want to have you think about is how can you test this to see whether 4 separate checkout lines or 1 long line is more efficient. This is scenario 1, where you choose which line you're going to get into.
Using a model is an excellent strategy that youth can use to test their ideas, to work through and then communicate their thinking. Watch as Lynn works with youth as they create a model using cards to demonstrate the efficiency of different types of lines. Youth also realize that models have limits but are valuable tools.
This next one is everybody's in the same line, but when this person's done, the next person. So this still services 4 people. So the cards represent people, and the number on the card represents the amount of time it takes them to check out.
Should we use front and back?
However you want to keep track.
Different types of lines.
So how are you going to keep track?
1, 2. Well, then I could go.
So
Yeah, but it's only 1, 2, 3, 4 at a time.
It's the same on the other one.
No, it's
Yes,
not.
it's only 1, 2, 3, 4 at a time.
Yeah, but this person has to wait for his buddy over here that got in front of him first. Then it adds up for everybody.
Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, I see.
This is a lot longer.
Okay, fair.
who's going to be first through this line?
3, then 5, then 6.
The 3 person is done after 3 minutes, right? So they leave. What's going on here?
6 person's still there.
And how many minutes are left for them to check out? 3. How many minutes are left for this person? 2. How many for this person? 4. So
So
Who has a new person in the line already?
That one.
This one. So another card would come up or another person.
yeah, but it's only gonna take as long as the longest person.
Okay. Is this a model?
Yes.
What are we modeling?
The time it takes.
The time it takes. What are we doing to model it?
Using cards and drawing.
Okay, using cards, we're drawing. What else?
We're doing math.
Are there things that are limited in this picture, in this model?
Yeah, because
And-
we only have 20 people.
We only have 20 people. We can't always account for all the things that happen in real life in our model. So we agree that this card piece is a model. We're trying to model whether this kind of a line or that kind of a line is faster. We are representing a real thing with something else is basically what we're doing.
So what did you notice in the video? You can share in the chat box. What were some things that you noticed? There was a lot of talking going on. The youth were talking to each other about their reasoning. The instructor was asking open questions. Kids were learning from each other. They were engaged in it. One of the things I noticed is there was a calculator there on the desk in front of them. So they're using some math tools as well as using the modeling. One girl was making a design with her cards. I noticed that too during the video. The instructor's debriefing, and she's still using those cards and still thinking mathematically by making a design. So I want you to look back at the math practices that I mentioned earlier and think about each of them. Were the students making sense of a problem and persevering to solve it? They really seemed very focused on figuring out what this model was and solving the problem. And it's a real world problem that they could see. I was just Christmas shopping this weekend, and I was thinking about this question as I was, after I'd finished preparing for the webinar today. It was on my mind as I was getting into one of those long lines where everybody's in a single line and thinking about how different stores choose different ways to solve this problem. The second one, reasoning abstractly and quantitatively. Yeah, they were using that skill, weren't they? And we could tell a little bit that they were using that skill because they were talking about it. That's number 3. They were trying to construct an argument to convince the others in their group which model was going to be more efficient. They were talking through the math and making sense of it. So they were using that quantitative thinking and talking about it together. And then were they looking for structures or patterns in the activity? Was there anything else you noticed in the video that you want to be sure we reflect on? So this is an example that you can share with your staff so they can kind of see what it looks like. See somebody who's pretty confident in facilitating an activity like this and see how math and these math practices can be integrated into an activity. Good job analyzing that video. Now let's summarize what we've covered so far. I shared with you the 7 strategies that you can use in your program, and we looked at each of those in a little detail about how you could incorporate it into your after-school program. And also some resources, well, one resource from Click to Science that you can use to help prepare your staff. And I'll have more of those with the recording of this webinar so you can find more resources for staff development around building confidence in integrated math. And then I also have right now some ideas to share with you about where you can go to find math activities to integrate into your program. But before I do that, I want to ask, are there any questions? Because this is kind of the end of the content. Did I cover enough information that you feel like you could make some changes in your after-school program to integrate more math into what you're doing, or to have students using these practices more intentionally, to be talking about math, to be problem solving together collaboratively? If you have any questions that we haven't addressed, please share them in the chat box. And I didn't see any suggestions for Common Core about tutoring with Common Core. So again, if you have any ideas about how to help staff build their confidence, or how to help tutors build their confidence in tutoring around Common Core, let us know. Great comments in the chat box. Thank you. Okay, so what can you do to get started to actually implement this in your program? The first suggestion I have is to start by talking to teachers in your school. They may have great resources that you can use. They may be willing to share some of the manipulative, some of the tools that they use in their classroom. There may be resources in their curriculum that they're not able to integrate during the regular school day that you could integrate into your after-school program. So start with your teachers and make them your closest allies on how to integrate math into your program. And next, after that, here are my top 3 resources. The first one is Family Math, and that is that book from Lawrence Hall of Science. And that is something you want to look for. Even if you're not going to do a family math night, there's lots of activities in there that you can use for math centers for a family night. I just picked an activity out of there today that I'm going to do on a webinar tomorrow with our 4-H staff to give them a chance to just do a little bit of playing with math and making it fun. The next resource that I recommend is the After-School Training Toolkit. And there are several training toolkits, but there's one, oh, I've typed that wrong. It should be After-School Training Toolkit on Math. There's one specifically on math that was produced for U.S. Department of Education by National Partnership for Quality in After School. It's about 10 years old now, but it has some really great resources there you can use for integrating math into your after-school program. That's where the Scouting Numbers game came from. And also in the chat box earlier, let me go back up so I can find it. Marianne shared a link to After School Math Plus and resources there that you can use to integrate math and some evaluation of what happens when after-school programs are able to do that. And then my third go-to is howtosmile.org. It is my favorite website for finding STEM activities. All of those activities there are from informal science institutions, museums, aquariums. They're real-world based activities, and it's a very easy to use searchable database. I did a quick search for math games and found 71 ideas for pre-K through 12th grade, and almost all of those math games had free or low-cost supplies that you would need to play them. So it's a great resource that you can use to find those ideas that you can have staff incorporate into the program. And that prepare and plan resource from Click to Science gives you a way to support them in deciding how to integrate that, to planning what they're going to do for integrating that activity. Our time is almost up now. I hope you do have some ideas that you can take back to your program and share. And this is my last chance to invite you, if you have some other resources to share, because I know we have some experts on the webinar today that have great resources that they're already using in after school. And I want you to feel like you can share those with us. We all want to learn from one another. Well, thanks for joining us today, and please do connect with us at clicktosciencepd.org and see what's coming up next. We will have another webinar in January. I forgot to write down that date, so watch for an email from Click to Science with the upcoming webinar and what's happening in January. And in the meantime, have a wonderful holiday. Have a good break. I hope you are able to find some time to relax and get away from work for a little bit and really spend some time on yourself before you come back refreshed in the new year. Thanks for joining us today. Bye, everyone.